I don't think, on the basis of the information we had at the time, which turned out to be defective, that I would and we would have made a different decision about the military invasion. But I'm absolutely clear we would have made very different decisions about the aftermath of the invasion. And there were catastrophic errors made afterwards which allowed the country to descend into chaos, things like the de-Baathification of all the security forces, which could and should have been avoided.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, the lack of planning and the chaos that ensued after Saddam fell. Why wasn't that planning, those discussions, the pros and the cons of things, discussed before the invasion, just to make sure that those kinds of consequences weren't felt then and are still being felt now?
The great irony is that they were discussed. It was as plain as a pikestaff that when and if the invasion had been successful in its terms to remove the apparatus of Saddam Hussein's government, that there would be an aftermath, and that, as Secretary Powell told President Bush, the President would be the proconsul of a country of 22 million people in 18 provinces. The State Department did a huge amount of planning, so did we in the United Kingdom. The fundamental problem was one we simply didn't anticipate, was that all that planning went by the board as a result of a quixotic, cavalier decision by Defence Secretary Don Rumsfeld to remove the State Department and those who knew about running civilian governments in the aftermath of war from any role at all. So we were caught up in the dysfunctionality, I'm afraid, of the Bush administration. And that was the fundamental problem with which not only we were faced, but obviously the US forces were faced, and above all, the benighted people of Iraq.
Personally, Jack, what was it like agonizing over a decision of going into Iraq? On a personal level, how do you feel when you turn on the news and see what's happening in Iraq today? And how has it changed you?
Well, of course I feel a very strong sense of responsibility. What I've done, including in the book that I wrote, is to try and set out not only what it felt like, but how I thought in the weeks and months leading up to a decision to take military action, to try and give others a sense of that. No, of course I have a very strong burden of responsibility, huge regrets and sorrow for the loss of life which took place particularly after the invasion, and for any of the loss of life of entirely innocent civilians, and deep frustration that much of the loss of life was unnecessary.